These are consequential challenges that have impacts in people's lives on a day-to-day basis. And our session is going to address how global standards, collaborative public-private solutions, and rights-based approaches can enable responsible AI with meaningful real-world impact. And we know that these things don't just happen on their own. It takes deliberation, it takes thought, it takes engagement to make sure that the products and approaches that we're using in the AI field avoid some of the pitfalls that may be associated with them. And the companies are going to share some of the good practices that they're engaging in about how that works in the real world. And we know if they don't engage in that way, that the risks are there and very much present. And so looking at how we can put in place practical safeguards that ensure that AI works for people, not only in advanced economies or for the dominant platforms, but for the people that we're trying to deliver these benefits for. Responsible and effective AI governance and clarity of rules for both companies and governments and alignment around the global norms will help us to get to that point. Companies, of course, have a responsibility to respect human rights and address the risk to people stemming from their products. And human rights due diligence, of course, is one of the process-based ways and a pragmatic way to weave this into corporate operations. But of course, governments are the ones that also have a responsibility here too to create a level playing field, and we talk a lot about that. We want the incentives for companies to be there so that the ones that are engaging responsibly are actually rewarded for that responsible engagement as well. Our BTech project at OHCHR is aimed at how do we make this conversation happen. So through convenings like this one, through engaging with companies, pulling out their good practices and letting all of you hear about them and encouraging others to do the same is what that project is really about. And we are really looking at and working with, of course, how to use tools like the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, but also, of course, UNESCO's AI recommendations on ethics, and figuring out how we weave those into the decisions and work that's being done now. And as I said, bringing this conversation to this summit where there is truly a global and multi-stakeholder effort is happening to really look at AI innovation and deployment has been incredibly important. So without further ado on that front, I want to hand over to my colleague and co-sponsor here. Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Peggy, and good morning, everyone. Ambassador Rantesma from Estonia and co-chair of the AI Dialogue that the United Nations is holding. Of course, Peggy and dear panelists, it's really wonderful to be here with you today to be part of this conversation on responsible practices and industry standards. And as we all know now, where AI is moving, from something we discuss in theory to really something that is shaping the decisions in real time in real institutions, and of course for real people. I'd like to thank particularly the Office of the High Commission for inviting us to join in on this, and for working with us on organizing this event. It's been a pleasure. And at UNESCO, we often return to a simple idea that trust is not something technology earns through ambition alone, but really it is earned through design choices, through safeguards and accountability. And that's why the recommendation on the ethics of AI, we believe, is so important, because it does give the world a shared foundation, a first step on how AI could be built and used in ways that protect people's rights, that promote fairness and support inclusion. So we've been translating this global agreement and framework into local realities and through what we call the RAMs, the Readiness Assessment Methodology Reports, which we've now launched in around over 80 countries. And just 2 days we did India's Readiness Assessment Report. And these assessments provide a kind of clear-eyed look at how regional landscapes can evolve, inviting us to move beyond theory and towards this responsible human-centered deployment of AI we hear about. And so by grounding in innovation in these evidence-based diagnostics, we hope to ensure that progress remains aligned with those shared values. But of course, a recommendation only matters if it can be applied by people who are actually catering, creating, and using AI. And so that's the purpose of the initiative I'm going to introduce today, and I'm very happy to say that UNESCO, in partnership with LGAI Research, is developing a global massive open online course, or a MOOC, as more commonly known, on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And the course will be developed on Coursera, delivered on Coursera, with a very clear goal to make AI ethics learning accessible to a wide global audience and to make it practical for day-to-day work. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the key idea behind the MOOC is ethics by design. And so in simple terms, that we don't wait until something goes wrong to ask these ethical questions. We should build these questions into the process from the beginning, and the course will help learners think through issues like fairness, transparency, safety, accountability, and inclusion at the stage when decisions are still being made, rather than after systems have already been deployed. The course, of course, is really going to be focusing on practical tools so that we can offer clear ways of thinking and working that can be used in everyday settings. So it'll help learners, for example, recognize common risks early, ask better questions during development, document the decisions made responsibly, and think through the impact of AI systems on different groups of people. We're moving beyond a one-size-fits-all approach, and we've done this by collaborating with experts from over 10 countries and 5 continents, with some of the leading minds from the University of Oxford and the Alan Turing Institute. And this global group, this global coalition, is really vital because AI, of course, doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's shaped by languages, it's shaped by cultural norms and institutional capacities, and of where it is developed and deployed. So by integrating these diverse perspectives, we're trying to move from the theory again to the lived reality. So ultimately, this MOOC is a capacity building effort with a simple purpose: to help more people around the world build and use AI in ways that are responsible, inclusive, and worthy of public trust. We look forward, of course, to this continued collaboration with governments, with industry, with academia and civil society as we take it forward, and we hope many of you will engage with the course when it launches, not only as learners, but also as partners in building a stronger culture of ethical innovation across the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim Curtis, UNESCO. We're all looking forward to it. Now we have anticipation. We're very fortunate to have an addition to our program today with Ambassador Tamsar, the permanent representative of Estonia, who's one of the co-facilitators for the Global Dialogue on AI that will be launched in July, and a big responsibility. And he's here to tell us a little bit about where it's heading and how you all can contribute. Please, Ambassador. Either use those ones or this one. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. I don't know, is it morning? Yeah, maybe. So after 3 days here in India, I think that I lost track of understanding, is it morning or evening? But thank you, UNESCO and Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, for convening this really important discussion, and of course to all our hosts here in India. And I also thank partners who contributed to this work. Today I'll speak on behalf of 2 co-chairs of United Nations Global Dialogue on AI governance, and 2 co-chairs are from Salvador and Estonia. The first Global Dialogue on AI governance was mandated by all member states through a General Assembly resolution adopted in August 25. So this is a member states-driven process. It belongs to every country, to all member states. And its task is very practical, while its scope is multilateral. So the aim is, to come together. It is a platform where governments and stakeholders exchange best practices and experiences. And this, we believe, can strengthen international cooperation on AI governance and ensure human-centric AI supports sustainable development and reduce, indeed, digital divides that are already there. So we've engaged with member states and different stakeholders about their priorities, and let me bring to your attention 4 points from these priorities. So first, They want safe, secure, and trustworthy AI systems. And the trust here, of course, is an absolute key word. Second, they want to close capacity gaps. Many developing countries need infrastructure, skills, and compute to participate fully in AI economy. And inclusivity and equal access are essential here. Third, they want governance approaches that can work across borders and be practical. So fragmentation raises the cost and weakens trust. So interoperability is absolutely key. And fourth, and that is, I think, quite actual here, they want AI anchored in human rights and international law. And this includes protecting vulnerable groups, addressing bias and discrimination, and ensuring oversight and accountability. Now, we know human rights are not optional. They are part of a mandate agreed by member states. And today's focus on responsible practices and industry standards responds directly to these priorities. And standards turn principles into action. They shape risk management, they clarify accountability, they guide human oversight, and they give companies and regulators tools they can apply in real systems. So let me say that the global dialogue will not, and I guess it cannot, impose one single model. We will listen, we will identify common ground, we will build on existing initiatives. Ethics of AI was mentioned here, and it's of course one of them. We'll avoid or try to avoid duplication, and we will focus on practical value. So I encourage you to bring your experience into this process, share what works, share what doesn't work, help us identify approaches that can scale across regions and level of capacity. And in best case, if we succeed, and failure is not an option, safety and trust will be visible in how systems are designed, deployed, and governed. They will be reflected in real safeguards and in benefits that reach more people, and this is very important for us. So I thank you and wish you a productive day, practical exchanges that move our common work forward. And with this, I give it over to the real experts and panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador. Wonderful to have you with us, and I think we're all looking forward. We're looking forward to having all of you join us in Geneva in July. So, with that introduction by the three of us, we're really, as the ambassador said, going to turn it over to those who can really inform us about how this work is happening, and I hope inspire us to both give support and emphasis, amplification to the work that you're doing and bring more into the fold around responsible business conduct. So with that introduction, I'd really like to start, Ankit Bose, with you from NASSCOM. We had a great conversation yesterday, and I'd love for you to inform our audience. You know, NASSCOM represents the leading Indian tech industries, and we want to hear more about your work and what you're doing to encourage companies and help them to ensure a responsible work environment.
Thank you so much for having me here, and it's my pleasure here to address the audience. So NASSCOM has been there for almost 4 decades plus, right? We have been helping the tech industry in the country to shape and change the whole agenda for the country. I think that's what we have been doing, specifically on responsible AI and trust, right? I think the mission for NASSCOM started 2021. So we started with a gap that we were seeing a lot of AI was getting developed, but again, I think we found that there was some missing element. That was the responsible, the trust, the human element, right? I think that is how the mission started. From that point in time, our main core objective has been to develop open assets, right? Build capacity, build adoption, right? And I think help all the different components in the ecosystem, right? Right from the government to the startups, to the SMEs, right? All of them. So we have been trying to help them go up the ladder and really become aware. I think not only the gloomy side of AI, but also the bright side. If they adopt responsible AI governance practices, right, at the early, they can have a big upside. I think that's what we have been doing.
Can I ask, Ankit, how does this work? You mentioned that full range of companies that are involved, and one of the topics we spoke a bit about yesterday is the difficulties sometimes in when you have big companies, we have some of them represented here, but also startups and small and medium enterprises. How do you differentiate? How do you make sure that we're engaging across that very differentiated group of industry?
Yeah. So I think if I segregate, right, I think they're the big techs, right? Then there are the services companies. Then there are the middle size, small, and startup. I think all 5 of them have different sort of engagement, right? The big tech, I think, are playing on the front foot, right? The services companies have to follow their contracts, right? The bigger services companies. The medium tier companies, they are really trying to understand how they grow their AI base, at the same time build, that services or product using right governance principles. But again, I think the bigger support is needed from the the small and the startup, right? Because they are really fighting for day to day, right? I think, and believe me, I think a startup founder has to first build a business, a tech, a team, right? And also get funding, and parallelly focus on a lot of things around governance, right? I think in that whole journey, we have seen they are putting it at a second or probably the side burner, which is something which we say is a complete no-no. If you do that, when you're building a product, right, you might miss when you're scaling. I think that's what we have seen.
Great, thanks very much. I think we're going to turn to the scale side of it now with Alex. You're next in line. So Alex Walden, you've been working on these issues within Google, and I think one of the insights that I've learned from you over the time we've known each other is really how complex it is to bring to product teams and those that are on the technologist side some of these issues of responsible business conduct and human rights. And give us the benefit of your wisdom about how that works and how we can do it better.
Thanks for the question, and I love that you said that, because I do see a very important part of my role as making sure that the stakeholders that we work with understand how things are working within companies, because that helps us be better and you be better advocates for helping us improve. So anyway, but to your question, because I know I'm going to be fast, I think where it really starts for us is like from the values perspective. Obviously, we're a company that's founded on values around freedom of expression and privacy, and bringing the benefit of our technology to everyone. And so that is where it begins. But obviously, we have things like, ultimately, it's the sort of governance inside of the company that is what permeates throughout the 180,000 people that work at Google to ensure that we are being responsible in the way that we're developing AI. So as a baseline for us, responsibility and thinking about what responsibility means has to start with human rights, and then we can build from there. So we have a corporate policy that says that we have a commitment to respect the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And we've also built on that with things like our AI principles that reinforce sort of more of an operational way in which we can manifest those values in all of the teams that are working to develop the various models or applications of the models in, say, Google Cloud or YouTube or search. Just to maybe hone in a little bit on the types of standards that we're using, because I think that's important, because there's so much work being done in our ecosystem. We use the UN guiding principles. We use the work happening at the OECD, the work at UNESCO, and engagement with our peers in industry through the BTEC project, through Global Network Initiative, and this is just a few. But all of the guidance that comes out of those places and the dialogue that happens there helps us ultimately inform how things are working inside the company. And then just one layer down, and then I'll stop. I think, having programs and processes like training and dedicated teams, ultimately that's how you operationalize this through getting a product to market. And so I can say more, but I think those are kind of the big picture structures for what's required for a company to do this at scale.
So, I'm not going to let you off the hook quite that
I got
easily.
more.
So, look, we know that this isn't always easy, though, right? That there are obstacles to really convincing people it's worth the time. I've been in the room where hand-wringing is described as no more hand-wringing about safety. We need to just move forward. And I'm sure there are pressures that you face, and as the lead for human rights within this company, trying to get your message heard. Tell me a bit about how you've been able to sometimes surmount some of those necessary challenges that you might see from that different perspective on whether or not these are hurdles or supports for the company to do its mission more effectively.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in general, we have sort of corporations are incentivized to put products on market that are safe and that are trusted by our consumers. The people know Google best through Google Search or Gmail, the varieties of consumer-facing ways they're engaging with our products. And so we do have an inherent sort of market business reason to put out products that people trust and deliver good outcomes. And so we have to have processes inside that make that real. And so what we do is we have model requirements just at the most granular level. Before any product goes to market, there are model requirements. And so those teams are focused on ensuring that they're validating the data and doing testing and doing evaluations. And that's at the model level. And then at the application layer, we have requirements for teams to be, again, doing testing, additional evaluations, setting additional guardrails, and focusing on what mitigations are going to be put in place for, again, things like Gemini before that gets launched. And then we have to have executives review these things. So before anything goes to market, leadership needs to understand what the risks are and how we're mitigating them, and have a plan in place to address that. So that is an important part of the process for us. And then last, we have post-launch monitoring, because obviously we can do all of the testing in the world, but once you've launched a product, there may be novel or new or residual risks that arise. And so we have to have a process for continuing to monitor that, understanding it, getting feedback, improving the products over time.
Great, that's super helpful, Alex, to understand that multi-layered approach that needs to happen within companies, including, I think, that executive level that you mentioned. I mean, the signals from on top will actually inspire all of those other levels to do what we're hoping they'll do. And we have another example with us of some of these practices. I want to turn to Hector de Roar, who's the Director of Responsible AI Public Policy at Microsoft. And we want to hear more about what you're doing to embed responsible policy practices within Microsoft's approach.
Thank you very much, Peggy, and thanks for having Microsoft here. So maybe I want to start with the inception of our responsible AI approach, which was in 2018. And at that stage, you didn't have codes, directives, regulations, frameworks guiding our approach. We're nearly starting from a blank page. And we didn't talk about foundational models or frontier models at that stage. It was all about like specific AI system and applications, such as facial recognition, for instance, which was very popular. So we forged our AI principles around, priorities such as privacy, such as reliability, inclusion, fairness, safety, security, and like these high-level principles. The whole challenge was to translate them into practice afterwards. And so it's really on this basis that we forged the Office of Responsible AI when we created it in 2019, around these principles, which then became our AI standard, guiding all our actions across our different programs. One of the program that I want to reference here is our sensitive use case program. So it's a team within the Office of Responsible AI that is in charge of doing some triage, challenging basically sensitive use case coming from our different markets on AI systems and models that could actually violate these principles that I was referencing. And so this team analyze these use cases, and then when it occurs that it's necessary, bring them to our ITER committee, which is our AI ethics committee, and it involved Microsoft board both at the CTO level and the president level. And I think the board inclusion is very important in this kind of like internal risk management framework. And so this work has been informed during the past years by many interesting developments. So the OECD AI principles, obviously, but also the UNESCO recommendation on AI ethics. And I think all these principled approach that evolve or refine nuanced with AI capabilities are actually so important and very useful signals for us to refine our own AI governance program within Microsoft.
And Hector, you've talked a little bit about how you look at it from an internal perspective, but we wanted to hear a bit of how you look externally, like what are the drivers between how you engage across the sector and with the government side as well?
Yeah, and I think we always navigate this very interesting interplay between best practices and international norms and regulatory standards. And a very good example here is the line of voluntary commitments that have been signed across the AI summits. And so if you look at Bletchley Park in the UK, or the South Korea summit that happened afterwards, it really helped us, as Alex was referencing, to ground our model testing approach, especially against public safety and national security risks. So when we talk about cybersecurity, for instance, or loss of control, or CBRN risks, that really like grounded some very solid testing approach with some concrete operational triggers, concrete high-risk domain that we're monitoring at the model level. So that was one. The OECD hype reporting framework, which came out of the Hiroshima process, is another very good tool that I was involved in, and I want to reference here. It was launched along the lines of the Paris AI Summit, and actually it's a very good way to understand how risk management transparency works in practice, and how real-world deployment experience and transparency experience can guide upstream developments. And so it's this kind of feedback loop that it creates that's very interesting. And because we're in Delhi, just to reference the voluntary commitments that were signed yesterday, I think that's another very, very, very good and positive approach that the Indian government have been taking, especially on one of the commitments which basically encourages company to forge multilingual capabilities approach. So basically build better evaluations against safety risk, not only in English norms, but beyond English norms. And I think that speaks about our principle of inclusion. That's so important, and I'm very happy that they initiated this work.
I have to say, one of the contrasts I've been making when I look at what's been talked about here in Delhi as opposed to prior summits is that issue of inclusion, and the language issue, I think, is so underrepresented in some of the conversations we have. So it's wonderful that you've given that a shout out. We're very fortunate, Yuchil, to have you with us as well. Yuchil Kim, who is the Vice President at LG for AI Research. So we'd really like to hear more about how you're engaging with these global technical and policy standards. We talked about the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the UNESCO recommendation on AI ethics, and of course the MOOC that's being worked on. So give us a sense of how these frameworks are being engaged with by LG.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's really happy to share our practice between the global AI giant. Yeah. So I need see some memos. I have a lot of things to talk about. LG AI Research is the leading AI company in Korea. So we are famous not only for our foundation models, performance, or solutions excellency, but also we have a lot of activities related on the responsible AI and inclusive AI. So there are two examples I'd like to talk about. First one is we have AI ethical impact assessment process. The process was made inspired by the UNGP's and the UNESCO's ethical impact framework. So we built this process and system in 2023, and from the 2024, we applied this process to all our R&D project. So as a result, in 2025 alone, we found more than 200 risk sets, and we tried to mitigate 4 out of 5 of them. Yeah. The second one is last year, we developed our own AI risk taxonomy. We call them KOT. We call that the Korea Augmented Universal Taxonomy. It is grounded in the universal human values, so on things like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Human Rights Treaties, and UNESCO's recommendation. So this one is the result of the taxonomy organized into 4 domains: the universal human value, social safety, Korean sensitivity, and future risk. So we have more than 200 categories, and we found the risk there. But the important thing I want to talk about is the Korean sensitivity layer is designed to be replaceable. So any country or region can plug in their own context. So we hope our taxonomy system can be a practical reference, especially for the countries in the global south, as they build their own AI safety standard that reflects their own realities. And the other one is to talk about inclusive AI. So we run many AI literacy programs in Korea. So from the teenagers to 20s, annually maybe more than 40,000 learners every year. So cumulatively, we learned more than 140,000 students. Yeah. So our program is the biggest AI literacy program in Korea, but we don't want to stop at our borders. So that's the reason why we collaborate with UNESCO to making a MOOC. So the essential of MOOC is for the practitioner. The practitioner usually struggling with the same question. How do I actually apply this in my day-to-day work? So we are focusing on the bridging the gap. So we provide the best standard risk. Yeah. So we get a lot of risk, Timothy mentioned. So we also contribute to our own experience. So I previously mentioned about our process and we made also our AI-powered data compliance system. And also I will mention soon we have an annual report about the AI ethics activities. So I hope the MOOC can be a good practice for everyone. It will launch in this half. Yeah. So last one is I want to talk about transparency. So we have a lot of activities about the AI, responsible AI or inclusive AI. So we published our annual accountability report on AI ethics. So yesterday we released the 3rd edition. So here's just some QR code of that. Yeah, I will spread out after our session. So please refer my documents. So, well, yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. No, I think it's super interesting to understand both how you've been looking at that learning process within the company, but also how that more global approach working with UNESCO is going to be very helpful. And I think it's one of those areas where we all know so much more needs to happen. But we've heard the company perspective here, and we're very fortunate to have with us from the World Benchmarking Alliance, Namit Agarwal. And Namit, I think one of the things that we've talked about is how we incentivize the race to the top amongst all of these actors in this space. And you're going to, I hope, give us some insights based on the work that the World Benchmarking Alliance is doing about how capital and investment can be used to make sure that innovation is being approached in a responsible way. Over to you, Namit.
Thanks for having me here. And I'm not representing investors, but we do work with several stakeholders, including investors, civil society, governments, and companies. So we are a nonprofit, and we try to strengthen accountability of the world's most influential companies so that their impact on people and planet can be sustainable. We also assess the world's most influential tech companies on whether they are advancing a trustworthy, rights-respecting, and inclusive digital future using standards such as the UN Guiding Principles, but also others that were mentioned by my fellow panelists here. Our role is to provide comparable, credible, and standardized data that our stakeholders can use because it's an ecosystem approach. So how can they work together in doing that? So capital can definitely incentivize innovation and responsibility, but capital alone cannot do that. We published our latest assessments of 2,000 companies at Davos last month, and particularly from the tech side, what we found is close to 40% of the companies have disclosures on AI principles, but just above 10% meet the expectations, global expectations on the governance aspect of it. And none of these 200 companies that we assess disclose their reports on human rights impact assessment. And I think that clearly shows that while there is a lot of intent, some work is happening, but governance and accountability are not really there. So we need a lot of work to happen there. And we believe responsible innovation requires incentives for long-term risk management, clear expectations that are tied to capital allocation, and consequences for weak governance, because it has to be consequential for companies to move in that direction. And I think that is where investors have a very catalytic role to play. We convene a coalition of investors and civil society organizations to promote ethical AI, and there are 64 investors representing $11 trillion of assets under management. And it's a structured engagement process that we organize. And we have seen some results. 19 out of 44 companies that we targeted in the last engagement period published new AI principles. 68% of large tech companies responded to investor outreach. In some cases, we have also heard companies coming and saying that such coordinated engagement puts things in motion internally, and that's when companies internally start looking at some of these things in priority. This definitely shows that capital allocation moves things, but it's better and faster if it is along with evidence and coordinated action and clear time-bound asks.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I think it's so interesting that we work in a sector that is incredibly based on data, but yet we don't necessarily bring it into this conversation in the ways that we need to. And that idea of both incentivizing the right practices and leverage within companies, but also, you know, too many conversations sort of focus on the tech industry as a whole and sort of group everybody together as if they're all engaging in the same way. And so the work that you're doing really helps us to understand those nuances more. Could you go a bit deeper and look a bit at some of the examples and concrete suggestions coming out of your work as to how to push that discussion forward more?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing is engagement and dialogue, and I think that is a very important way. And we have been fortunate to have good engagement with both Google, Microsoft on this panel. But again, it's important to build on engagement because it's a continuous process. It's important for investors to engage with some of the leaders, but also engage with companies who are fence-sitters to bring them along faster. The laggards will definitely catch up and come on board. But for investors, and if you want to, for capital and finance to incentivize responsible innovation, responsible AI, there are three things that we believe investors should definitely do. First is on AI governance and board oversight. Investors should ask whether there is clear board-level responsibility on AI risk, whether executive incentives are aligned with long-term human rights risk mitigation, and whether governance applies across the full AI value chain. Second is on implementation at product and business model level, and we heard some examples just now. Investors need to move beyond policy statements and ask companies how ethical principles are translated into product level strategies, how high-risk use cases are identified, and whether there are internal mechanisms and controls to identify harms as they emerge. And third is robust human rights impact assessments and asking whether companies conduct AI-specific impact assessments, are they publishing meaningful summaries, are mitigation measures integrated into product cycles? And I think this is an area where we have seen a lot of gaps.
Great, thanks, Namek. I wonder if we could actually take that one step further and get some input from the other members of the panel on what that looks like in practice. Because of course, this is a panel that's focused sort of on the company perspective. I think we have some of our real partners here on the civil society side. And as much as they understand that that conversation needs to happen, I think they sometimes find it difficult to be able to make sure that the way those risks are assessed really bring in the voices, bring in the experiences of people, and particularly people in different contexts and different environments in which the companies are being, their products are being rolled out. So those issues of stakeholder engagement, access, dialogue with the civil society side, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about some of the lessons that you've all learned there. And I see you shaking your head. Please tell us from the NASCOM perspective how you look at it.
I think from an enterprise lens, right? I think when they are trying to implement responsible AI or trustworthy AI, right? I think the biggest issue is there are different groups internally, right? The tech group, the business group, the legal risk group, right? The finance group, right? And then all of them are working in silos, what we feel like, because the business want the best, for the business, the tech wants to put the best technology, right? The risk is very, conservative, right? And finance always has an upper limit on what they want to spend. So that's what issue. I think what helps is if all of them build a collaboration, which can be taken use case by use case. Right? Again, the high impact use case can have more investment, more focus versus a low risk. Right? I think that's the first thing. The second thing is I think from NASCOM lens, what we are seeing, there's a lot of frameworks which are getting developed. Right? Every country, every place you go, there's a new framework. Right? But from the framework heavy, or the concept heavy to action is not happening. I think that's a big gap, right? So if a technologist is trying to implement responsible governance, right, a developer is trying to implement, right, he will be lost in the framework. He doesn't know what's actionable, right? I think what he should do. So I think that's one big need. I think that's what we are also driving. We are trying to drive multi-different organization-led approach where we have all different sizes of organizations, where we come together and start discussing, collaborating, implementing, right? I think that's the second nugget, right? I think these are 2 points. I know time is up.
No, that's great. I mean, I think it shows that that collaborative effort is going to be super important rather than the siloed approach for so many practical reasons as well, that companies can only respond to so many different frameworks. And what they need to do is have the simple guidance and support that they need to actually implement at this stage. Hector, do you want to say from quick comments from the company side about how you're facing those challenges?
Yeah, two very quick examples on how we involve civil society and academia in this process. So our work really sits at the intersection of policy, research, and engineering groups. And to inform product development with our responsible AI principles, we regularly publish some internal policies. And it's an iterative process with our research teams, with our product teams. And as part of this process, we actually include academics who have like a specific REST domain expertise, or think tanks and civil society organizations which have been thinking very deep about the deployment of one AI system, one AI model in certain contexts. And so that really informs, the product work that we do from the inception. And I think the second example that was raised is, like the big topic and the governance challenge that we face is the importance of refining AI evaluations. That's the constant thing. And in India, for instance, we've been working with some NGOs around a project named Samishka to build some community-led benchmarks, which is basically a safety tool that we include afterwards in the system construction, to really get data sets that are grounded in a community with a specific cultural aspects, specific contextual aspects. Because if you just translate safety tools from English to another language, you lose all the context for which this safety tool has been built. And so that's another example of, really an area where we would need more cooperation between civil society and governments and companies. It's really how do we build these safety tools beyond English norms, such as in India.
Oh, that's great, and it takes work to do that, and the more we can spread, you've done some of the work, you know how to do some of it, and diffuse it amongst other companies that could learn from it. That's part of what we're trying to do with BTech, but I think there's a lot more to be done. Yuchil, do you want to come in?
Yes, I agree with his comment with the safety or responsible AI, we should work together. So that's the reason why we make our annual report, because sharing our best practice and also sharing our struggles, what we had a struggle about it, that we think that's a very important thing. So this is my colleague mentioned about it. There's an African proverb that said, if we want to go fast, go alone. If we want to go far, go together. So building a trustworthy and safe AI ecosystem is not a sprint. So it's a long journey, so we can go together. Yeah.
It's a long journey with a lot of sprints happening day to day, as far as I can tell, some of them here at the summit. But over to you, Alex.
Yeah, so much sprinting. I think maybe just to pick up specifically on the stakeholder engagement piece. So a few things. One, I think it's important for companies to have a programmatic approach to stakeholder engagement. So we need to have ways in which we're regularly engaging with stakeholders in general, not just on a specific product question. But so I would say first, a programmatic approach. And then second, something that is more ad hoc. So when we need to consult specifically on a product, we need to have a sort of process and way to do that. The other thing is we have programs internally like trusted tester programs where we are working with third-party organizations to make sure that they have early access or pre-launch access to models or to a product in order to test it so that we can identify potential risks or errors ahead of time and address them before we launch a product. And then last, just to highlight something that we do is similar to others, our research team called Impact Lab, which is part of the overall human rights programmatic work at the company, engages directly with communities in doing research to inform how we are improving our products and what we're developing. So that work is also happening through the research team specifically. And they recently launched something called the Amplify Initiative, which is an open source app. This is specifically on language inclusion that allows members of the public and communities to engage in the fine-tuning work around our language models. So specifically that there's a wealth of information and expertise out there that we should all be benefiting from, or that we can benefit from, and it's open source, so we can also share it with others in industry.
That's great to hear, and I'm sure more needs to be done on that front, but the amplification effect is so crucial. Look, we could probably go on talking all day, but I see the clock is ticking down. Fortunately, rather than us try to draw the conclusions from this, we've welcomed in another speaker to give us some concluding remarks, to pull some of these pieces together. I'm very happy to invite Parite Adani from Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas to help us think through some of these issues. Please.
Thank you for that. I think it's partly easy and partly tough because there was a lot to unpack from this conversation. But firstly, thank you. You've held the conversation beautifully. And thank you to UNESCO, United Nations, NASCOM, and everybody in this room who brought their knowledge, their conscious to this conversation. Actually, I just want to talk a little bit about a conversation with the machine. As we were thinking about this topic and we were engaging on this issue, I wanted to share something that I feel resonates with a lot of what you've talked about. I did something in preparation. I decided to ask the tools that we're talking about over here a question that we avoid asking ourselves. I'm talking to the tool, do you have ethical limits? Do you understand the difference between what it can do and what it should do? And I'm going to quote verbatim. At a conscious level, the answer is I don't know, and neither does anybody else. Sorry. The gap is a philosophical, uncomfortable position where think of me as having no home inside. Thank you, I really appreciate that. Sorry. I have no continuous thread of existence, and I cannot verify about myself what you have asked me. I don't have any consequences to bear. Now, what came back, though unexpectedly thoughtful, showed us about restraints, values, and what it appears to have internalized. It acknowledged the difference between instruction and conscience, a lot of what we've talked about today. And so, I think when we talk about this, we said human rights are not optional. We cannot ignore the impact on people and planet. We have to make incentives for good governance. So when a tool cannot understand this for itself, I think we have to do the job. What we have chosen in India, and when we're having this conversation, this location is not ceremonial, it's very deliberate, that we have thought about innovation over restraint. And we have to think about that being the right choice. Sorry, I've developed some allergy, I'm so sorry. We allow innovation to be in a safe place without feeling the weight of the regulation, and I think we have a lot to learn from all of you who've been doing this for so long. The privacy, the safety, and the impact on children and vulnerable groups. The question is whether the people that we're talking about are going to be the subjects of the transformation or just its objects. An AI system that cannot understand a language or a Hindi woman speaking legal questions is serving a narrow slice of what it calls a universal solution. So any framework for safe and trusted AI that does not express and understand informality, language, and gender is not incomplete by accident. It's incomplete by design. I think the ideas of an interoperable, flexible system. It's a forward-looking and an inclusive one. I think a lot of what you mentioned, Alex, about governance inside the company, it's wonderful what you're talking about. And I think the voluntary commitments that have been reflected in this summit is also fantastic. So now, we come to the harder work. The ambition is real, the infrastructure exists, but ensuring that we don't leave with just good intentions and good ideas, but action. Thank you.
Thank you, Pravidya, Dani. It's wonderful to hear those perspectives. We're coming to the close of this session. Just a few parting words to all of you. I think we've done enough in this short conversation to really give a sense of how complex some of these issues are, the dynamics within companies and externally and then globally across different geographies, the challenges that are faced. But the reality is that all of us have a responsibility to engage on these, and we each have different roles. We've heard a bit about what some of the companies are doing. We've heard a little bit about how we can challenge them and incentivize the actions that they take in the space. There are good practices, but they're not universally applied. They're not available to some companies that may want to engage in this, and we can help them to do this. And NASCOM and I we've been discussing a little bit about how we simplify things, bring in more into the fold of this conversation. And of course, we're here in an environment where we have governments that are looking at what do we need to do to create responsible business practices and incentivize them as well. So I hope everybody walks out of the room thinking, what can I do to continue this conversation? How can I differentiate between companies that are thinking about these issues in a way that will deliver for myself, for my children, for my future, the ways that we want to see? AI innovation will work if there's trust and if the companies that are delivering it actually invest in delivering products that will really give those values, that will inform and give us human dignity going forward in the future. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for fitting this into your schedule today, and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Hi, Peggy. Peggy, we would just like to request you to